I thought my life was perfect. I thought the people I loved most were incapable of cruelty. But the truth, it's a cold, sharp blade. And once I found it, I knew my revenge would be the only thing left of us. I remember the way the light hit the glass in our office. It was a high-rise in the heart of Seattle. 22 years old, and I felt like I owned the world. My name is Maya, and back then, I believed in the American dream. I believed that if you worked hard, if you were loyal, the world would give you back everything you put in. My mentor, Sarah, was like a mother to me. She was 45, sharp, elegant, and she had built Oratech from the ground up. She saw something in me. She said I reminded her of her younger self, before the world got its teeth into her. I spent every night at the office, making sure her vision succeeded. I didn't care about the overtime. I didn't care about the missed parties, because I was building a future with Marcus. Marcus, he was the golden boy of the marketing department. We were engaged to be married in June. He used to hold my hand under the table during board meetings, a secret pulse of warmth in a cold corporate room. He told me he loved my ambition. He told me he loved how I could see through people. But I couldn't see through him. The first red flag was a whisper. I was staying late, the cleaners were the only ones left, and I heard voices coming from Sarah's private office. It was Marcus, and he wasn't talking about marketing. He was laughing, a low, cruel sound I had never heard before. "She's so easy to manage," he said. "She thinks she's part of the family." I stood in the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. My breath felt thin, like I was breathing in broken glass. Who is she? Was it me? I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was tired, that I was projecting my own insecurities onto the man I was going to spend my life with. But then, the files started disappearing. Small things at first, data entries for the new software launch. I was the lead developer. I had written the code. I knew every line like it was my own heartbeat. But when I went to the server, my access was denied. "Just a glitch," Sarah told me the next morning. She didn't look me in the eye. She kept adjusting the silk scarf around her neck, a nervous habit she only did when she was lying. "We're just tightening security before the big reveal, Maya. Don't be so sensitive." Sensitive. That's the word they use to silence women when they start to notice the cracks in the floor. I started watching. I started listening. I saw the way Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances in the break room, a look of shared ownership, a look of a secret kept between two people who were supposed to be on my side. I found a receipt in Marcus's pocket while I was doing the laundry. A receipt for a jewelry store I had never been to. An emerald necklace, $5,000. It wasn't my birthday. It wasn't our anniversary. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, my pale skin, my tired eyes. 22 years old, and I felt like I was aging a decade every hour. I began to realize that the family Sarah talked about was a cult of two, and I was just the engine they were using to drive their success. I was the one doing the work. I was the one coding the future, and they were the ones preparing to leave me behind. The tension in the house grew. Marcus became distant. He started taking business trips to Portland, but his social media showed him at a high-end restaurant in town. I didn't confront him, not yet. I wanted to be sure. I wanted the truth to be so undeniable that I couldn't talk myself out of it. I spent my nights digging, not into the code, but into the company's financial history. I found things, terrible things. Oratech wasn't just a software company, it was a shell. Sarah was moving money, laundering investors' funds through accounts that didn't exist. And Marcus, my sweet Marcus, he was the one facilitating the transfers. Every time I looked at him, I felt a wave of nausea. I felt like I was living with a stranger. I would wake up in the middle of the night, watching him sleep, wondering how many times he had lied to me while I was dreaming of our wedding. The wedding. I had already picked out the dress, a simple, white lace gown. Now, when I looked at it, it looked like a shroud. I knew I was being watched. Sarah started asking me about my personal laptop. She started checking my browser history. She was scared. She knew I was smart, and she knew that if I looked too closely, her empire would crumble. The red flags were no longer flags, they were sirens, screaming in my ears. Run. Get out. They are going to destroy you. But I didn't run. I couldn't. Because I had put my soul into this company. I had given them my youth, my trust, my love. If they were going to take it all, I was going to make sure they paid the interest. I started to plant my own seeds, tiny bugs in the code that only I knew how to trigger. I started recording every conversation, every whispered plan, every cruel laugh. The air in the office felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm. People stopped talking when I entered the room. The interns looked at me with pity. Did they know? Did everyone know but me? I felt isolated, a lone figure in a sea of betrayal. My parents lived in Georgia. They thought I was living the dream. I couldn't tell them. I couldn't tell anyone. If I spoke it out loud, it would become real. So I stayed quiet. I stayed small. I played the part of the loyal employee and the doting fiancé, while inside. I was building a furnace. I waited for the moment the truth would finally break the surface. The truth didn't come in a whisper, it came in a roar. It was a Tuesday. It's always a Tuesday, the most mundane day of the week. I had forgotten my keys at the office. I went back at 10 p.m. The building was a skeleton of light against the black sky. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs. I wanted the exercise. I wanted to clear my head. When I reached our floor, I saw the light on in the server room. I walked softly, my sneakers making no sound on the carpet. I peered through the glass. There they were, Sarah and Marcus. They weren't just talking. They were celebrating. On the screen was my project. Project Phoenix, the code I had spent 2 years perfecting, the code that was supposed to revolutionize data privacy. But they were changing the metadata. They were stripping my name from the credits. They were replacing it with their own names. She'll never know, Sarah said, her voice dripping with cold satisfaction. By the time we launch in Singapore tomorrow, she'll be out of a job and a fiancé. We'll tell the board she had a mental breakdown, that she tried to sabotage the company. Marcus, you did so well keeping her distracted. Marcus, he leaned in. He kissed her, not a quick peck, but a deep, lingering kiss. It was easy, he whispered. She's so desperate for love, she'll believe anything. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. The world tilted. I felt the floor drop away. I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling. Everything was a lie. The engagement, the mentorship, the late nights, the family. It was all a curated performance to steal my mind and my work. They were going to frame me. They were going to ruin my reputation. They were going to leave me with nothing while they became billionaires on the back of my labor. I felt a scream rising in my throat, but I choked it back. If I screamed, they would win. They would call security. They would enact their plan right there. I backed away, slowly, into the shadows of the hallway. I watched them through the glass, laughing, drinking expensive champagne, over the corpse of my career. I made it to the stairwell before I collapsed. I sat on the cold concrete steps, and I broke. I wept until my eyes burned, until my lungs felt like they were filled with ash. 22 years old, and I was already dead to the world I had built. I thought about Marcus's face when he proposed, the sunset at the beach, the ring, the promises. It was all script work. He was an actor, and I was the audience he was robbing. I thought about Sarah, the woman I had trusted with my secrets, the woman I had called for advice when my grandmother died. She was a predator, and she had been grooming me for slaughter since the day I walked through the door. The betrayal felt physical, like a sickness in my blood. I wanted to give up. I wanted to go back to Georgia and hide in my childhood bedroom. I wanted to let them have it all just so I didn't have to feel this pain anymore. But then, I remembered the Phoenix. The code. My code. They thought they had stripped my name, but they didn't know the code like I did. They didn't know about the logic bomb I had hidden in the foundation weeks ago, when I first felt the red flags. I stood up. I wiped my face. The girl who had entered that building an hour ago was gone. The breakdown was over. The revenge was beginning. I went home. I lay in bed next to Marcus. He came in an hour later, smelling of Sarah's perfume. He kissed my forehead. Go back to sleep, babe. Work was crazy. I kept my eyes closed. I kept my breathing steady. Inside, I was a storm. The next day, I played the part. I went to work. I smiled at Sarah. I let Marcus hold my hand. I watched them prepare for the launch. The board members were arriving from all over the country. The press was being briefed. You look tired, Maya, Sarah said, her eyes sparkling with malice. Maybe you should take the afternoon off. You've worked so hard. Let us handle the launch. I'd love to, I said, my voice as smooth as silk. I'll just go home and pack for the honeymoon. The look of triumph on her face was almost enough to make me laugh. I went to my desk. I opened my private terminal, and I sent the first of 12 emails. I wasn't just going to stop the launch. I was going to incinerate their lives. The ballroom was filled with the elite of Seattle. The champagne was flowing. The lights were dimmed. A massive screen displayed the Oratech logo. Sarah stood on the stage, looking like a queen in her emerald necklace. Marcus was in the front row, preening like a prince. They were moments away from becoming the new faces of tech. And now, Sarah announced, her voice booming through the speakers. I am proud to present the future of privacy. Project Phoenix. She pressed the button. The screen didn't show the software. It showed the video I had recorded in the server room. The room went silent, a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. There was Sarah, and there was Marcus, talking about how they were going to frame me, talking about how they were going to steal my work. She's so easy to manage, Marcus's voice echoed through the ballroom, magnified by the high-end sound system. The crowd gasped. The investors stood up. The press began to flash their cameras. Sarah froze. Her face went from triumphant to ghostly pale in a second. She looked at Marcus, who was trying to crawl out of his seat. But the video was just the beginning. The Phoenix code activated, but it didn't launch the privacy software. It launched the ledger. On the screen, the financial records of Oratech began to scroll. The money laundering, the shell companies, the lists of investors they had defrauded. Every dirty secret, every cent stolen, displayed for the world to see. I was standing in the back of the room, wearing my wedding dress. I had dyed it black. I walked slowly down the center aisle. My heels clicked against the marble. Everyone turned to look at me. The betrayed girl, the one they thought they had broken. I reached the stage. I looked Sarah in the eye. You told me I was part of the family, I whispered into the microphone. Well, family shares everything, so I decided to share your secrets with the world. Maya, stop this. Marcus screamed. He tried to grab my arm. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. The FBI had arrived. I had sent the emails to the authorities hours ago. I had provided the keys to the servers, the recordings, the receipts. As they led Sarah and Marcus away in handcuffs, I watched their faces. There was no more laughter, no more cruel jokes, only the raw, ugly face of fear. Sarah tried to scream something at me, but the agents pushed her forward. Marcus looked at me with tears in his eyes, begging for mercy. I didn't give him any. I stood on that stage as the building was cleared. I was 22 years old, and I had just destroyed an empire. The next few months were a blur. The trial was the biggest news in the country. I was the star witness. I told the truth, over and over again. They lost everything. The company was liquidated. The assets were frozen. They were sentenced to 20 years for fraud and grand larceny. I didn't take any of the money. I didn't want it. I moved back to Georgia, to the small town where the air smells like pine and the people are real. I sit on my porch now, watching the sunset. Sometimes, I think about the girl I was. The girl who believed in the American dream. She's gone. But the woman who is left, she's stronger. She's wiser. I found out the truth, and now, my revenge is final. I am Maya, and I am free. If you have ever been betrayed by the ones you love, don't let them break you. Stand up, find your truth, and take back your life. Subscribe for more stories of justice and revenge.